The cranberry sauce dripped from the edge of the white porcelain plate like blood. I stared at that drop, slowly creeping toward the tablecloth, and thought that it was the same way life drained out of me, one drop at a time, every time I sat at this table. Grandma, pass the salt, the voice of Obadiah, the eldest grandson, snapped me out of my daze. I held out the salt shaker, trying not to let my hand shake. Today was Thursday, our traditional family dinner at Percy and Tabitha's house. A tradition that had long ago turned into a weekly torture, but I kept coming. Perhaps out of stubbornness. Perhaps out of fear of admitting the obvious, I wasn't welcome here. The potatoes are burned, Tabitha grumbled, picking at her portion with her fork. Rosie, you know kids don't like crust. My daughter pressed her lips together. If someone would help me in the kitchen instead of spending 3 hours on the phone with customers. Let's not get started, sighed Percy, my 42-year-old son, cutting the meat with such force that the knife squeaked on the plate. We have guests. Guests. The word hit me harder than if he'd thrown the plate at the wall. Guests. Not mom, not grandma. Guests. Actually, I coughed, trying to sound casual. Today is a special day. May 31st, Humphrey and I met. It was... Mom. Rosie rolled her eyes. We've heard that story 100 times. Actually, no. I tried to smile. It's a different story. That day. It's about Grandpa again. Vanity, Rosie's 12-year-old daughter, mumbled, staring at the phone under the table. Boring. Put the phone away during dinner, young lady, I said automatically, as I had done hundreds of times in the school library during my 37 years on the job. Don't tell my kid what to do, Rosie cut me off. We have our own rules. I felt the color flood my face. I just wanted to tell you how that day, Humphrey, I said. Oh my God, Mom! Percy put his fork down with a clatter. No one wants to hear these endless stories about Father. He died 3 years ago. No more living in the past. There was silence in the room. I looked at my son. His cheekbones reddened, his eyes narrowed. I had once held him tiny in my arms and sang lullabies. Now he looked at me like a pesky fly. I was just thinking. My voice treacherously shook. For God's sake, Rosie sighed theatrically, addressing the children, but loud enough for me to hear. Shut up, widow. We're sick of your memoirs. Obadiah and Wanichi's laughter sounded like a gunshot. Shut up, widow, Obadiah repeated, clearly pleased with the new phrase. Time had stopped. I sat up, clutching the napkin under the table so hard that my fingernails dug into my palm. Percy coughed, obviously embarrassed, but didn't say a word in my defense. Kids, that's no way to talk to Grandma, Tabitha said without much conviction. Yeah, I have to go. I stood up, feeling my legs buckle. Thank you for dinner. But we haven't served dessert yet, Tabitha said with feigned surprise. I'm on a diet, I lied. The doctor said, it doesn't matter. Do you need a ride? Percy asked, and I could see the hope in his eyes that I'd say no. No, I'll call a cab. At your age, you should learn how to use a car-hailing app, Rosie snorted. It would save a lot of money. Money. It always came down to money. The money I'd given them over the years, for the down payment on Percy's house, Rosie's wedding, for the grandchildren's private school. I'll be fine, I said, pulling on my coat. Call me when you get there, Rosie said, turning away from the TV. I knew she wouldn't answer if I did. The cold May evening embraced me as I stepped out onto the porch. Elk Grove was hushed, the windows of the houses glowing yellow like fireflies. I'd lived here all my life, knew every street, every turn, and yet, at this moment, I felt like a total stranger. The cab arrived 12 minutes later. The driver, a young man with long hair and a ponytail, smiled at me in the rearview mirror. Where are we going, ma'am? 34 Oak Street, I answered, leaning back in the seat. Rough day? He asked, pulling out of the seat. It's a hard life, I said, and I regretted it. But the driver just nodded as if he understood. It happens. We spent the rest of the trip in silence. The city floated by outside the window of the park where I'd once taken little Rosie on swings. The library where I'd worked for nearly 4 decades. The bakery where Humphrey and I went every Sunday. Humphrey. I could almost hear his voice. Trix, don't let them treat you like that. But he was always stronger than me. He knew how to set boundaries. And I I just loved them too much. The house greeted me with silence. An old but well-maintained mansion on Oak Street, the only thing left of my parents. I turned on the light, kicked off my shoes, and walked into the kitchen. I made tea herbal tea as the doctor had advised for better sleep. Sleep. It was ironic. I hadn't slept well since Humphrey was gone. With cup in hand, I went upstairs to the bedroom. Our bedroom with a double bed on which I now occupied only my half, as if Humphrey could return at any moment. I changed into my nightgown, sat in a chair by the window, and sipped my tea. "Shut up, widow!" The words echoed in my head. Widow. As if that was my only definition. As if all 67 years of my life had been reduced to that word. I remembered Humphrey's funeral. Rosie had cried the loudest, though she'd barely spoken to her father in recent years. Percy stood stone-faced, like his father at his grandfather's funeral. We got home and I made dinner for everyone. No one asked how I was feeling. The following weeks passed in a daze. The kids would stop by, check to see what I was eating, what medications I was taking, and then disappear. Until the first phone call. "Mom, we need to replace the roof and we don't have the money. You realize with the kids it's so expensive right now?" I gave Percy $15,000. It was money set aside for the trip Humphrey and I had dreamed of taking. Percy didn't even say thank you. Then there was Rosie. She had decided to change jobs and needed to hold out for a few months. I paid their bills while she looked for a new place. They started stopping by more often, but only when they needed something. Money. For me to babysit. To make dinner for everyone. "Mom, you're home all day anyway. What should you do?" I took Vanity to ballet lessons 3 times a week. I picked Obadiah up from school when he had a fever. I listened to Tabitha complain about my son, who doesn't help with the children at all. Laundry, cooking, cleaning, anything to be useful, so they wouldn't forget about me. But with each passing month, I felt more and more like a servant, not a mother or grandmother. "Mom, you didn't do it the way I asked you to again. Geez, is it so hard to remember that kids don't eat green vegetables? Sorry, we're 3 hours late. We forgot to warn you that we had a change of plans." "No, Mom, we can't take you to the concert. There won't be any old people there. You'll feel out of place." "Don't tell those boring stories. Kids aren't interested." "Why do you still keep your father's things? Don't you think it's time to move on?" I tolerated it. I smiled. I told myself they weren't being mean, that it's hard for them, that I'm the one who's too sensitive. But today. "Shut up, widow." The cup shook in my hands, and a few drops of tea fell on my nightgown. I set it on the windowsill and walked over to the dresser. The top drawer creaked as I opened it. There, under a stack of sweaters, was a mahogany jewelry box. I pulled it out and returned to the chair. Inside were letters, dozens of letters from Humphrey. He wrote to me every day when he went away on business trips, even in the age of cell phones and email, because real feelings need to be expressed in ink on paper tricks. I pulled one out, a random one, and unfolded the yellowed sheet. "My dear Trix, saw the sunset over the mountains today and thought of you. About how you love the pink color of the sky before the sun goes down. About how you wrinkle your nose when you laugh. About how you're the bravest person I know, even though you think you're a coward." I folded the letter. Tears ran down my cheeks, but I didn't even try to wipe them away. Brave man. Humphrey always saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. Night shrouded the room. I sat in the chair, poring over memories like the pearls of a broken necklace. Our first meeting in the library. His ridiculous marriage proposal when he was so nervous he dropped the ring in the fountain. Percy's birth. How we cried with happiness. Rosie's first steps. School plays. Graduations. Weddings. When did everything change? When did my kids turn into these cold, calculating people? Or had they always been like that and I just didn't want to see it? I remembered how Percy had told me at 16 that I was reading too much and living too little. How Rosie had declared at 23 that Humphrey and I were too simple a people to understand her ambitions. At the time, those words had hurt, but I'd written them off as youthful maximalism. Now I realized they weren't random outbursts. They were their essence. It was slowly getting lighter outside the window. I didn't sleep a wink, but I felt a strange clarity. It was as if the fog that had enveloped me for the past 3 years, no, much longer, began to clear. I stood up, walked to the window, and opened it. The cool morning air rushed into the room, bringing the smell of freshly cut grass and the promise of a new day. Shut up, widow! I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't have to take it. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to admit the obvious. My children didn't love me. Perhaps they never had. That thought should have made it hurt more, but in a strange way, I felt relieved. It was as if I'd finally shed the heavy backpack I'd been lugging around for years. I pulled an old suitcase out of the closet, the same one Humphrey and I had once taken on our honeymoon. The leather was cracked, but the locks still worked. The plaid lining smelled of lavender and memories. Morning had taken hold. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, painting intricate patterns on the bedroom floor. I sat on the edge of the bed, still clutching Humphrey's old letters in my hands. The night without sleep hadn't made me tired. On the contrary, I felt unusually clear-headed. I put the letters carefully back in the box and walked over to the closet. An old suitcase lay on the top shelf. I took it out and ran my hand over the worn leather, wiping away the dust. This suitcase held not only a piece of my past, but perhaps my future. My gaze fell on a silver frame photograph on the bedside table, Percy and Rosie at their high school graduation. They were smiling, happy, and full of hope. I had smiled at that picture once too. Now all I felt was bitterness. I opened a dresser drawer and pulled out a leather-bound day planner. In my 37 years as a school librarian, I'd gotten used to writing things down. And even after I retired, I hadn't changed that habit. Flipping through the pages, I found what I was looking for, a spreadsheet of expenses for the past 5 years. $32,000 for the down payment on Percy and Tabitha's house, $21,000 for Rosie and Clarence's wedding, $14,000 for Obadiah's private school, $18,000 for Vanity's dental care, $7,000 for Percy's legal aid when he was accused of negligence at work, $9,000 for refresher courses for Rosie. The list went on and on. Over the years, I'd given more to the kids than I could afford. The librarian's pension wasn't generous, but I saved on everything: clothes, food, medicine, just to help them. Humphrey always said we were spoiling them too much. Tricks. They need to learn to stand on their own 2 feet. But I couldn't say no. Every time they called with another request, I could hear in their voices the babies I'd once cradled in my arms, and each time I said yes. I closed the day planner and walked to the window. Elk Grove was waking up. The neighbor was walking her terrier, the milkman was leaving bottles by the door, the school bus was picking up the kids on the corner. Just an ordinary morning of an ordinary day. Except for me, nothing would ever be ordinary again. With a determined stride, I headed for the study, the small room at the end of the hallway that used to belong to Humphrey. After he died, I'd hardly ever come in here. Too many memories. The mahogany desk was covered in a thin layer of dust. I ran my hand over the polished surface as if greeting an old friend. Then I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a folder labeled Investments. Humphrey had always been a practical man. One should save for a rainy day, he used to say. But I went beyond just saving. After I retired, I started attending a senior investment club at the community center. At first out of curiosity, then with a growing interest. Eugene Paxton, a former banker who ran the club, saw potential in me. "You have an analytical mind, Mrs. Winborn. Librarians are good at organizing information and seeing patterns." I started small with a few stocks in local companies. Then I diversified my portfolio by adding bonds and index funds. Over the years, I kept a double ledger, one for my children, which included a modest pension, and another, the real one, where my investments grew and multiplied. I opened the folder and looked at the last statement. The amount in the account made me smile. The children had no idea that their poor librarian mom had such funds. Funds that were more than enough for a new life. I pulled out a blank sheet of paper and began to write. My handwriting, which had become almost calligraphic over the years of working with catalog cards, ran down the page. "Dear Percy and Rosamond, when you read this letter, I will no longer be in Elk Grove." I stopped, rereading what was written. Too dramatic. Humphrey would have laughed at such a phrase. I crumpled the sheet and began again. "Percy and Rosamond, last night's dinner made me rethink a lot of things. When Obadiah and Vanity shouted, "Shut up, widow," and you didn't stop them, I realized that our relationship had reached the point of no return. Wrong again, too accusatory. I didn't want to leave with a grudge. After drinking a cup of tea, I sat down at the table again. The third attempt was a success. I wrote straightforwardly and honestly, without accusations, but without self-justification, about starting a new life. That I was putting my house up for sale, a house that belonged only to me because I had inherited it from my parents. About no longer supporting them or their children financially. I have loved you from the first day you were born, and I will love you until my last breath. But love should not turn into slavery, neither for the giver nor the receiver. I hope someday you will understand my decision, Mom. I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it on the coffee table in the living room, where the kids would be sure to notice it when they came to check on why I wasn't answering the phone. The next call I made was to Jenna Holbrook, a local realtor. We weren't close friends, but we met occasionally at book club. Beatrix? She sounded surprised. To what do I owe this early call? Jenna, I want to sell the house, I said without preamble. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Your house on Oak? But you've lived there your whole life. That's exactly why I want to sell. It's time to move on. Another pause, then a business-like tone. Okay. When can I come in for an appraisal? Today's no good. Yeah, I'm leaving. Can you do it without me? You've got spare keys since you watered my flowers last year. Beatrix, what's going on? There was concern in her voice. It's nothing, I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I just figured at 67 it wasn't too late to start over. After talking to Jenna, I called the bank and arranged to transfer the funds to a new account in another city. Then I contacted Eugene at the investment club to notify him of my plans. I always knew you were an adventurer, Trix, he laughed. Just don't forget to give me your new address so I can send you our newsletters. The last call was to a cab service. I'd booked a car for noon. Now it was time to pack my suitcase. I opened my closet and started going through my things. What to take with me to my new life? My gaze fell on the blue dress Humphrey had given me for my 30th wedding anniversary. To match the color of your eyes, he'd said then. I'd only worn it twice, for my anniversary and his funeral. After a moment's hesitation, I folded the dress and put it in my suitcase. Then I added a few casual outfits, comfortable shoes, underwear, and a makeup bag. I didn't have much jewelry, a wedding ring that I never took off, a pearl necklace from my parents for my 18th birthday, a silver bracelet given to me by the school when I retired. I took off my wedding ring and stared at it for a long time, resting it in the palm of my hand, then resolutely put it back on. It wasn't a symbol of the past, but a part of me, a part I wanted to keep. In a small travel bag, I put my photo albums, my box of Humphrey's letters, my day planner with investment records, and a few of my favorite books. Everything else could stay here. Furniture, dishes, mementos accumulated over decades. Material things never meant as much to me as memories. After I finished packing, I took a seat on the living room couch and looked around. Every corner of this house held a story. This was where I'd grown up. This was where Humphrey had brought me after we were married. Our children were born and raised here. I remembered how Percy, at 3, had broken his mother's favorite vase and cried, afraid of punishment. How Rosie, at 7, baked cookies for the first time and proudly served them at tea. How Humphrey and I sat on this very couch on long winter evenings, reading books and listening to jazz. So many happy moments. Where and when did it all go wrong? Perhaps when Humphrey and I decided that love meant giving our children everything they wanted. Perhaps when we stopped holding them accountable for their actions. Or when I continued this practice after his death, desperately clinging to every opportunity to be needed by my own children. I remembered Percy asking for money for a new car last year. Tabitha says we need a bigger minivan for the kids. I gave him almost all of my savings from the escrow account. Then a week later, I saw pictures on his Instagram of him fishing in his new boat. A little gift to my favorite person, the caption read. When I gently asked about it, he replied with irritation, "Geez, Mom, are you following me? I'm a grown man and I decide for myself what to spend my money on." Or how Rosie left Vanity with me for 2 months every summer. "Mom, you have nothing to do anyway, and Clarence and I want to travel." They'd go to Europe. and I'd take my granddaughter to museums and parks, cook healthy meals, and check her homework. Vanity was a good girl, but every year she became more and more aloof, spending more and more time on her phone, responding more and more often with rudeness to my attempts to make contact. Grandma, you're so old-fashioned. No one says sorry anymore. It's not cool. And last year, when I got the flu and asked Rosie to pick up Vanity a couple days early, my daughter threw a real tantrum. Mom, we have excursions paid for. You can't just change plans like that. Take your meds and cope. That's when I first thought about the fact that I was not a mother to my children, but a free babysitter and an ATM machine. The ringing of the phone snapped me out of my memories. Rosie's number. I didn't bother to answer it. A minute later, the message tone beeped. Mom, are you okay? Why aren't you answering? I set the phone aside, then resolutely opened the settings and muted it. Let them worry. Although they probably weren't worried about my health, but about who was picking Obadiah up from the sports section tonight, as we had agreed a week ago. The doorbell rang. I looked out of the window and the cab had arrived, even though it was still half an hour away. Coming! I shouted, though the driver couldn't have heard me. I looked around again, checking to see if I'd forgotten anything important. My gaze fell on an old photograph on the mantel of Humphrey and me on our wedding day. I was wearing a simple white dress I'd made myself from a magazine. He was wearing a suit borrowed from his brother. We smiled as if the whole world belonged to us. I took the picture off the mantelpiece and packed it carefully in my travel bag. This memory had to go with me. As I left the house, I didn't look back. I didn't want my last memory of this place to be a glance over my shoulder. Instead, I resolutely closed the door, turned the key in the lock, and walked down the porch steps. Good morning, the driver said, opening the trunk. Where are we going? To the bus station, please, I answered, handing him my suitcase. Vacation? He asked, helping me place the luggage. No, I smiled. A new life. The salty wind hit my face as soon as I stepped off the bus. I inhaled deeply, feeling the sea air fill my lungs. The bus station in Brinkliff, a small seaside town 3 hours from Elk Grove, was nearly empty on this weekday afternoon. I picked up my suitcase and looked around. No one had met me. No one knew I was coming. For the first time in years, I was truly alone, and the thought evoked not fear but a strange, almost forgotten sense of freedom. Taking my notebook out of my bag, I checked the address. Back on the bus, I'd looked through the listings and picked out a few options. First on the list was a cozy cottage overlooking the ocean. It sounded promising if the price matched the description. A cab took me to the right address in 10 minutes. The cottage turned out to be a tiny house on the outskirts of town, with a shabby veranda and peeling paint. It did have a view of the ocean. If you stood on tiptoe and looked out the attic window. The owner, a gaunt woman in her 70s named Gladys Parker, gave me an appraising look. Are you alone? No husband? No children? All alone, I answered, my voice sounding more confident than I'd expected. Good, she nodded. I don't like noise. The last tenants had parties every Friday night. I had to kick them out. The inside of the house was no better than the outside. Leaky roof, creaky floorboards, ancient stove that doesn't work properly. And the price, frankly, was a bit steep. I'll think about it, I said, jotting down Gladys's phone number. The next two options were no better. By late afternoon, I was almost desperate, but I decided to check the last address, an apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building near the center. It was on a quiet street lined with maple trees. Brick, 3 stories high, with wide windows and small balconies. As I pressed the bell of apartment 3B, I braced myself for another disappointment. The door was opened by a man about my age with a neatly trimmed gray beard and lively brown eyes. Mrs. Winborn? He held out his hand. Lionel Gardner. We spoke on the phone. The apartment was exactly as I'd dreamed. Bright living room with a bay window overlooking the street. A small but functional kitchen. A bedroom with a window to the east. To wake up with the sun, as Mr. Gardner noted. And best of all, a small balcony that on a clear day overlooked a strip of ocean. I'll take it, I said without thinking. You didn't even ask the price. He smiled. I can afford it, I said with the confidence of someone whose investment was yielding a steady return. We signed the contract on the spot. Mr. Gardner was not only a landlord, but also a neighbor. He lived across the hall. If you need anything, just knock, he said, handing me the keys. In the meantime, I'll leave you to get settled in. When the door closed behind him, I walked slowly around the apartment. My apartment now. I ran my hand along the windowsill, checked the water pressure in the bathroom, opened and closed the closet doors. Everything worked. Everything was clean and well maintained. This apartment had no history, at least not my history. There were no memories here, no ghosts of the past. I unpacked my suitcase, put my things on the shelves, put the picture with Humphrey on the bedside table. Then I opened the balcony doors and stepped out, exposing my face to the evening breeze. There was indeed a dark blue stretch of ocean in the distance. I stared at it until it got dark. I slept the first night in the new place without dreams, a deep, healing sleep. In the morning, I was awakened by the sound of seagulls and the smell of freshly baked bread from the bakery on the first floor. I stretched, feeling my body fill with energy. Glancing at my phone, I found 17 missed calls and 23 messages. Percy, Rosie, even Tabitha were all trying to contact me. The last message from Rosie read, "Mom, Percy and I came to your house. Where are you? We're worried. Call us back right away." They found the letter. Now they knew I'd gone away. And of course, they were in a panic. Not because of worry about me, but because of the sudden withdrawal of financial support and the prospect of selling the house. I muted the notifications and tucked my phone away in my desk drawer. Let them wait. I had more important things to do, getting to know my new town. Brinkcliff turned out to be exactly as I'd hoped. Small, but not provincial. Enough tourists in the summer to support good restaurants and stores, but not so many that it felt like a theme park. People on the street said hello without even knowing each other, a habit long gone in Elk Grove. I found a cozy cafe on the main street and ordered breakfast, a salmon and herb omelet. In Elk Grove, I never had breakfast in a cafe. Too wasteful, I told myself. In fact, too lonely. Here I savored every bite, watching the passers-by and sipping the excellent coffee. "New in town?" the waitress asked, pouring my coffee. The name on the name tag was Louise. "How did you guess?" I smiled. "Everyone knows everyone in Brinkcliff. At least the regulars do." We got to talking. Louise, a woman in her 50s with cheerful wrinkles around her eyes, had lived here all her life. She recommended the best places to walk, the freshest bread at Olson's Bakery, and warned me to stay away from the fish restaurant on the pier, an overpriced tourist trap. "Where's the library around here?" I asked, paying for my breakfast. 3 blocks away, at the intersection of Willow and Primorskaya. Don't miss it. It's a Victorian-style building with columns. After thanking Louise, I went in search of the library. Brinkcliff was situated on the hills running down to the ocean, so there were scenic views from almost any point. I walked slowly, enjoying the walk and the feeling of freedom. No one was waiting for me at home. No one called to pick up my grandchildren from school. No one demanded money for a new roof or dentist. The library I really couldn't miss. The grand red brick building with white columns and a wide staircase looked like a little temple of knowledge. The sign at the entrance read, "Brinkcliff Public Library, founded in the year 1896. Inside, it smelled of books, wood polish, and something else, that special smell of silence and concentration that only libraries have. I inhaled deeply, feeling nostalgic for the 37 years I'd spent among the bookshelves. A young woman with a lock of red hair and thick-rimmed glasses sat at the front desk. "What can I do for you?" she asked, looking up from her computer. "I'd like to apply for a library card," I replied. "I've just moved to Brinkcliff." "Welcome, I'm Audrey Finch, head librarian, and you are?" "Beatrix Winborn. Trixie is fine." I filled out the forms, showed my ID, and 5 minutes later I had my new library card. "You look like you know libraries well," Audrey said, handing me a glossy rectangle of plastic. 37 years as a school librarian in Elk Grove. I couldn't keep the pride out of my voice. Audrey's eyes lit up. "Really? That's amazing. We just don't have a volunteer for the children's reading hour on Saturdays. Our regular reader, Mrs. Bloomfield, broke her hip. Would you like to?" I opened my mouth to say no. Wasn't that why I'd left Elk Grove? So I wouldn't have to take care of other people's children? But then I imagined a Saturday morning, a circle of children listening to a story, and that special magic that happens when a child is first immersed in the world of a book. I'd love to, I heard my voice say. Wonderful! Audrey clapped her hands together. Come this Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning. We usually read something seasonal. We talked some more about the library, about new books, about the cataloging system. Then Audrey took me to the reading room, a large room with high ceilings, wooden tables, and comfortable chairs by the windows. Make yourself comfortable, she said, and welcome to our library family. Family. The word no longer conjured up painful associations for me. Maybe because it meant something different here, a community of interest, not blood. Free choice, not obligation. I chose a chair by the window overlooking the town square and plunged into reading an Ann Tyler novel I'd been meaning to read for a long time but hadn't had the time. Time in the library was different, quiet, measured, unhurried. I read, took notes, sometimes just stared out the window. And for the first time in years, I felt like myself, not someone's mother, not someone's grandmother, not someone's widow. Just Beatrix Winborn, a woman who loved books and had a right to a life of her own. The next few days passed in the pleasant hassle of settling in. I bought some plants for the balcony, new curtains, brightly colored cushions for the sofa. At a secondhand furniture store, I found an antique rocking chair, just like the one in my study in the school library. Every morning I had breakfast at Louise's Cafe, then went to the library or explored the city. On the first Saturday, I held a children's reading hour and enjoyed it so much that I agreed to do it weekly. In the evenings, I sat on the balcony with a book and a glass of wine, another little joy I hadn't allowed myself before. My phone continued to burst with calls and messages. I looked through them morning and evening, but I didn't respond. The tone of the messages changed from concerned to annoyed, then downright angry. Mom, where are you? We're going crazy with worry. Rosie, day 1. Seriously, Mom? You just pick up and leave like that? That's irresponsible. Percy, day 2. I can't believe you put the house on the market. It's our house too. Rosie, day 3. You can't do this to us. We're your children. You have an obligation to help us. Percy, day 4. Obadiah is sick. He needs his grandmother. Come back immediately. Tabitha, day 5. Mommy, I'm pregnant. I need your support. How can you be so selfish? Rosie, day 7. This message almost made me call until I remembered that Rosie had done the same move in college when she needed money urgently. Then the pregnancy was miraculously resolved as soon as I transferred the required amount. By the end of the second week, the calls became less frequent and the messages shorter and angrier. They realized that their tactics weren't working, that I wasn't coming back just because they wanted me to. Friday night, on my way back from the library, I met Lionel Gardner, my landlord and neighbor. He was walking a small dachshund on a leash. Good evening, Mrs. Winborn, he said. How are you getting along in our house? Fine, Mr. Gardner, and please call me Trixie. Only if you call me Lionel, he smiled. By the way, there's an outdoor jazz concert in the city park tonight. Would you like to join me? I hesitated. I would never go to a concert alone in Elk Grove, and I certainly wouldn't accept an invitation from a man I didn't know. But here in Brinkliff, I was a different person, a free man. I'd love to, I replied. The concert was wonderful. A local jazz quartet played classics by Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong. Lionel and I sat on a blanket, drank wine from paper cups, and talked about books, about music, about trips we had taken and planned to take. Lionel turned out to be a former professor of English literature, retired 5 years ago. A widower like me. His wife had died of cancer 8 years before. They had no children. Sometimes I regret it, he admitted. But then I see my colleagues torn between their own desires and the demands of children, and I think that maybe it's all for the best. Children don't always bring happiness, I said quietly, thinking of Percy and Rosie. Do you have children? He asked. 2, but we're not very close. He nodded understandingly and didn't ask any more questions, which I was grateful for. When the concert was over, Lionel walked me home. We stopped at the door to my apartment. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," I said. "Thank you for the company," he replied. "You know, there's something going on in Brinkliff every Friday. The next one is a local artist show. Sounds interesting. So we have a deal then?" There was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "We have a deal." I nodded. I closed the door behind me, leaned back against it, and smiled. For the first time in years, I had a date. An unofficial one, between two older people, but still a date. And I was enjoying it. The phone on the table flashed with new messages. I picked it up, read the last one. "Mom, Vanity's elementary school graduation. You have to come. She's your granddaughter, for crying out loud." Before, those words would have made me drop everything and rush. Guilt was my constant companion. Guilt for not helping enough, not giving enough, not being present enough in the lives of my children and grandchildren. Now I simply deleted the message. Then I opened my calendar and wrote down, "Friday, exhibit with Lionel." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to check to see if that date coincided with some family event in Elk Grove. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 4. Aftermath. Asterisk, asterisk. It had been almost 2 months since I had left Elk Grove. One sunny morning, I was having a leisurely breakfast on the balcony of my apartment when the phone rang with an insistent trill. It was Jenna Holbrook, the realtor who was selling my house. "Beatrix, are you sitting down?" She sounded worried. "What's wrong?" I felt my shoulders tense. "Your children have hired a lawyer. They're trying to challenge your right to sell the house." I sighed, but I wasn't surprised. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I'd expected something like this. On what grounds? Something about the house being a family inheritance, that they have the right of occupancy. Honestly, it sounds like complete nonsense from a legal standpoint. The house is in your name only. Then there's nothing to worry about. I tried to make my voice sound more confident than I felt. Not really. While all this is being sorted out, the deal is delayed. The young family who wanted to buy the house might change their mind if it drags on too long. I thanked Jenna for the information and promised to contact my attorney. As I hung up the phone, I stared out at the ocean for a long time, trying to calm my raging emotions. I expected anger, despair, maybe even guilt. But instead, all I felt was tired and strangely relieved that now I didn't have to pretend we had a good relationship. That same day, I contacted Arthur Gillespie, the elderly lawyer who had once helped Humphrey with his will. He listened carefully and assured me that legally, my position was unimpeachable. "You inherited the house from your parents. All the deeds are in your name. You have paid taxes and utilities. They have no rights to the property." I asked him to represent me. The situation was unpleasant, but I felt strangely calm. For the first time in my life, I was doing what I thought was right without thinking about what the kids would say. A week later, I received a letter from Percy, the first I'd had since I'd been away. It was full of reproaches, veiled threats, and attempts at manipulation. "Mother, how could you do this to us? We are your children. This house is our inheritance, our memories, our future. What will the grandchildren say when they find out that Grandma sold their house to strangers?" I reread the letter several times, trying to find a shred of genuine concern for me. I couldn't find any. It was all about them, their inheritance, their memories, their future. I existed only as a custodian of their possessions, not as a living person with my own desires. I didn't answer. Instead, I continued to settle in Brinkliff, to make new acquaintances, to enjoy my freedom. In the evenings, I sometimes allowed myself a glass of wine on the balcony, watching the sunset and reflecting on how my life had changed. One morning, about a month after Jenna's call, I was checking my email and found an email from Arthur Gillespie. The court had dismissed my children's lawsuit. Nothing else was preventing the sale of the house. That same day, the calls began. First Percy. I didn't answer. Then Rosie. She ignored me. Even Tabitha tried to call. I turned off the phone and went to the library, where I helped catalog rare books. When I got home that evening, I turned on my phone and found 23 missed calls and a dozen messages. The most recent was from Rosie. "Mom, we need to talk. We're coming to Brinkliff on Saturday." My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't ready for this meeting. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready, but maybe that's why it couldn't be put off. I woke up early on Saturday, even though I usually let myself sleep in on the weekends. I couldn't find a place to sit with excitement. I went through my entire closet before settling on a simple blue dress. Not too dressy, but not homemade either. I didn't want them to think I was dressing up to meet them. The doorbell rang at 11 in the morning. I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and went to open it. Percy and Rosie stood on the doorstep. My children, the ones I'd once carried in my arms and cradled at night, the ones I'd given up everything for. They looked like strangers now, wary, their lips tightly pressed together. "Hello," I said, stepping aside. "Come on in." They came in, looking around with ill-concealed surprise. They must have expected to see something pathetic, a small, cramped room, reflecting my plight. Instead, it was a spacious, bright apartment overlooking the ocean. "Sit down." I pointed to the couch. "Tea? Coffee?" "Nothing," Percy said, sitting down on the edge of the couch as if he was afraid of getting dirty. "Mom, we need to have a serious talk." I sat down in the chair across from them, hands folded in my lap. "We're here to take you home," Percy blurted out, looking me straight in the eye. "I'm home," I replied calmly. "This isn't home." He pointed around the room. "This is some kind of rented apartment in a foreign city. Your home is in Elk Grove with us, with your grandchildren. With my grandchildren yelling, 'Shut up, widow.'" I could hear the bitterness in my own voice, though I tried to keep my voice even. "They're children," Rosie interjected. "They don't know what they're saying. Obadiah and Vanity miss you. We all do." "Don't we?" I looked at my daughter. "I thought you missed my money and free babysitting services." "How can you say that?" Percy was outraged. "We're your children." "Yes," I nodded. "And that's why I expected respect and love from you. But all I got was demands and neglect." "Mom, if we've done anything to offend you, we apologize," Rosie said with a practiced tone. "We didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said, suddenly soft. "You just didn't think about it. I was part of the furniture, always in place, always available, always ready to help. But I'm a person, not a piece of furniture." "We know you're a person," Percy exclaimed. "But you're also a mother and a grandmother. You have responsibilities to your family." "And family has responsibilities to me," I countered. "To respect my boundaries, appreciate my time, thank me for my help, not take it for granted." There was silence in the room. Percy and Rosie looked at each other. "Okay," Percy said at last, clearly moving toward a premeditated plan. "We understand. We've been maybe a little inconsiderate, maybe even ungrateful, but we've realized our mistakes. We'll change. Won't we, Rosie?" "Yes," she nodded hastily. "We'll call more often, invite you to family dinners, to consult with you on important matters. And we really hope you change your mind about the house," Percy added, trying to keep his voice casual. "It's a family legacy, after all. Our childhood memories." "I've already signed the pre-sale agreement," I said calmly. "A young family with 2 children. Very nice people." "What?" Percy jumped to his feet. "You can't sell the house. It's our house." "It's my house," I said firmly. "It was left to me by my parents, and I have the right to use it as I see fit." "What about us?" Rosie exclaimed. "Where do we stay when we come to Elk Grove?" "A hotel?" I suggested. "Or a friend's. You have friends in your hometown, don't you?" Rosie bit her lip. "Mom, be reasonable. You can't just throw away your whole life, your family." "I'm not cutting anyone off." I shook my head. "I'm just starting to live for myself. Something I've never done before." "What about financial support?" Percy asked, getting to the point. "Your letter said that you'd stop helping us. But you don't mean that, do you? You're our mother. You should be helping your children." "Should I?" I looked at my son with genuine surprise. "You're in your 40s. You have jobs, careers, families of your own. Why do I still have to support you?" "Not support," Percy corrected me. "To help. It's different." "You both make more money than I did working at the library," I pointed out. "And you still ask for money all the time. Maybe the problem isn't income, but expenses?" "You don't understand," Rosie sighed. "These are the times. Everything is expensive. Kids, school, clubs, vacations." "I understand," I stood up, letting her know that the conversation was over. And my decision will not change. I will no longer be your ATM or your free babysitter. If you want to maintain a relationship as equals, as adults, I don't mind. But it won't be the same. Is that your last word? Percy asked, rising too. Yes, I answered firmly. Then we have nothing to do here. He headed for the door. Come on, Rosie. Rosie hesitated, looking at me. Mom, do you miss us a little? The grandchildren? I softened. Of course I miss you. You are my family and I will always love you. But I've also learned to love myself, and I'm not going back to my old life. Rosie nodded, accepting defeat. Will you at least send Vanity a birthday card? She'll be 13 next month. I will, I promised. And a present too. I walked the kids to the door. The parting was awkward and awkward. Percy mumbled bye. Rosie hugged me tentatively. When the door closed behind them, I leaned back against it and closed my eyes. My heart was pounding, but not from fear or regret. It was from relief. I'd made it through. I hadn't given up. I hadn't let guilt take over. My phone rang on the balcony, a text message. I opened it. Lionel was asking if I wanted to walk to the ocean. It was a beautiful day, and the salty breeze promised coolness. I said, I'd love to, and went to change. From the kitchen window, I could see Percy and Rosie getting into the car. They were arguing about something. Percy was gesticulating vigorously. Rosie was shaking her head. I felt no gloating at seeing them upset, just a quiet confidence that I'd done the right thing. I loved my children. I always would. But that love no longer meant sacrificing my own life, happiness, and dignity. The morning light flooded the kitchen of my new apartment. Over the past year, I'd moved from rented housing to my own place, a spacious one-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building overlooking the ocean. The view from the balcony was not of a narrow strip of water in the distance, but of a vast blue surface merging with the horizon. I sat at the table with a cup of coffee, enjoying the quiet of the early morning. Through the open window came the cry of seagulls and the distant sound of the surf. In front of me was a stack of mail that I had taken out of the box last night, but hadn't had time to look through. Bills, sales brochures, a catalog of seeds for the balcony garden. I methodically sorted through the envelopes as my hand froze over a brightly colored postcard of the school theater. I flipped it over. Dear Grandma Trixie, I'm playing Ophelia in the school play on June 18th. It would be great if you could come. I miss you. Your Willow. Willow is the youngest daughter of Percy and Tabitha, aged 10. The only one of the grandchildren who never treated me disparagingly. I pulled a picture out of the envelope. Willow in her rehearsal outfit, with a wreath of artificial flowers on her head, smiling at the camera. I stared at the picture for a long time, studying my granddaughter's facial features. Over the year, the girl has grown noticeably. Her facial features have become more defined. In her smile, I recognized Humphrey. The same sly expression, the same dimples on her cheeks. Once upon a time, a card like that would have caused me to react immediately, a phone call confirming I was coming, booking tickets, planning a gift. And then guilt that I don't see my grandchildren enough, don't participate enough in their lives. Right now, I just put the card aside. I'll send Willow a gift and a birthday card. Maybe I'll call after the play to see how it went. But I'm not going to Elk Grove. And the amazing thing is, I don't feel the least bit guilty about it. Finishing my coffee, I picked up my phone to check my email. Among several emails, one marked important from my bank stood out. I opened it and smiled. Finally, the sale of the house in Elk Grove was finalized and the money had been deposited into my account. The sale had taken longer than expected. At first, Percy and Rosie tried to challenge my right to own the house, found some legal loophole, and sued. I had to hire a lawyer, provide all the documents proving that the house belonged only to me, a will from my parents, all the receipts for taxes and utilities signed by me. In the end, the court sided with me, and the children had to put up with it. Then there were problems with buyers. A young family who originally wanted to buy a house could not get a mortgage loan. I had to look for new ones. After several months of uncertainty, the house was finally bought by a family of doctors with 3 children. Now, looking at the amount on the screen, I felt strangely relieved. The last material link to my past life had been severed. The house where I had grown up, where I had raised my own children, where I had lived with the Humphreys for nearly 40 years, now belonged to other people. They would create their memories there, fill it with their voices, their stories. I swiped my finger across the phone screen, opening folders. I found the one called Family Expenses, a spreadsheet I'd kept for the past 15 years. It recorded every expense for the kids and grandkids, from the big ones like the down payment on Percy's house to the small ones like pocket money for vanity. Huge sums when you put them all together. A huge part of my life, given to others. My finger hovered over the delete button. A second's hesitation, and I decisively clicked. Confirmed the action. The file was gone. I put the phone down, stood up, and walked to the window. Brinkliff was already awake. Athletes were running along the promenade, cafes and stores were opening, fishermen were out to sea in their boats. My town. Now I really felt it as my own. Over the past year, I had made connections and friends. Volunteering at the library turned into a paid position. I led children's readings 3 times a week and cataloged rare books. I joined the local choir and book club. I got to know my housemates and the regulars at the breakfast cafe. I even started social media accounts, not to connect with my kids, but to connect with new friends and keep track of cultural events in town. And there was Lionel. Our friendship slowly but surely grew into something more. We went to concerts and exhibitions, cooked dinners for each other, exchanged books with notes in the margins. In his presence, I felt not like an old widow, but like a woman. Interesting, attractive, alive. Glancing at my watch, I saw that I had time to spare before lunch with Lionel. After I showered and changed, I decided to walk to Abernethy's jewelry shop on the main street. The day was warm and sunny. I walked at a leisurely pace, saying hello to people I knew. I stopped at the Olsen Bakery to buy a fresh baguette. Lionel liked French baguettes for lunch. The bell over the door of the jewelry shop jingled melodiously as I entered. Edwin Abernethy, an elderly jeweler with a magnifying glass on a string around his neck, looked up from his desk. "Mrs. Winborn, what can I do for you?" "Hello, Mr. Abernethy." I approached the counter. "I'd like to discuss an idea with you." I took my wedding ring off my finger, a plain gold ring I'd worn for almost 45 years, even after Humphrey's death. "I want to melt it down into a bracelet," I said, placing it on the velvet cushion. "Can I do that?" The jeweler examined the ring carefully through a magnifying glass. "Of course you can. It's good gold, 18 carats. But are you sure? Engagement rings are usually kept." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "I don't want it in a jewelry box. I want to wear it in a new form. To begin a new chapter, preserving the memory of the previous one." Abernethy nodded understandingly. "Any ideas for a design?" "Something simple and elegant, maybe with our wedding date engraved inside." We discussed the details and I left a deposit. The bracelet would be ready in 2 weeks. As I left the workshop, I rubbed my finger where the ring used to be. It felt strange, as if I had lost something and gained something at the same time. The ring was a symbol of marriage, of loyalty, of belonging to each other. Now it would be something else. A reminder of the good things that had happened, but not an anchor holding it to the past. Lunch with Lionel was as warm and casual as usual. We sat in a small restaurant overlooking the harbor, sharing news, making plans for the weekend. "Book club tonight, remember?" Lionel asked as we finished our coffee. "We're discussing Journey to the End of the Night." "Of course I remember," I smiled. I had prepared some interesting questions for the discussion. After lunch, I went to the library to check out the rare editions catalog I was working on. Then I stopped by the clothing store, where I bought a light linen dress for the upcoming summer festival. In my previous life, I had rarely bought new clothes for myself, saving money for my children and settling for old things. Now I allowed myself small pleasures: a beautiful dress, good perfume, quality cosmetics. In the evening, the book club gathered in the back room of the Seabreeze Cafe. 10 people, from a local college student to a retired sea captain, were seated around a large table. I, as club leader, opened the discussion with a question about the symbolism of travel in Celine's novel. The discussion was lively. I enjoyed the intellectual conversation, the opportunity to express my thoughts and hear different points of view. I had a book club in Elk Grove too, but there I always held back for fear of appearing too smart or pretentious. Here I could be myself read, thinking, having my own opinions. When the formal part of the discussion was over and the participants moved on to tea and cookies, a newcomer, a woman about my age named Helen, came over to me. You spoke so interestingly about the theme of alienation in the novel. You have a deep understanding of literature. Thank you, I smiled. I've worked in libraries all my life. Oh, me too, Helen perked up. At the University Library in Portland. And you? School library in Elk Grove. How far away from your family? I hesitated for a moment. I used to answer such questions in detail, talk about my children, grandchildren, show pictures, exaggerate their accomplishments, and downplay their problems. I created the illusion of an ideal family. We do not communicate, I answered briefly. By the way, what do you think of the next book? I think 100 Years of Solitude is an excellent choice for summer reading. Helen took the hint and didn't inquire further. The conversation turned to literary topics, and I felt relieved. Another small step toward freedom, freedom from having to maintain the facade of the perfect family. When I returned home after book club, I found the red light blinking on my answering machine. I pressed the play button. Mom, it's me, Percy. Calling to see how you're doing. It's been a long time since we've talked. Awkward pause. Listen, we're having a little financial difficulty. Tabitha lost her job and Obadiah's got a sports camp in another state. Maybe you could help? Just a little, just 5,000. We'll pay it back as soon as... I hit the delete button without finishing listening. Percy called about once every 2 months with similar requests. It was always the same pattern, first pretending to be interested in my life, then moving on to the true purpose of the call. The first few times I felt a pang of guilt, almost succumbed. But then I realized nothing had changed. To Percy, I was still just a source of money. Not the mother he loved and respected, but the ATM that was supposed to keep the cash flowing when he needed it. Rosie called less frequently, but with similar requests. Mom, Vanity needs braces. Mommy, we want to send Vanity to summer camp. Mommy, our roof is leaking. Willow was the only one who called just to talk, to tell me about school, to ask how I was doing. Maybe because she was too young to understand the family's financial games. Or maybe she was just different. More empathetic, less selfish. I turned on my laptop and opened the airline's website. For weeks now, I'd been researching options for a trip to Alaska, a trip I'd dreamed of for 30 years. Humphrey and I had planned to go there after I retired, but we hadn't made it in time. His health had begun to fail. I put off booking for a long time. Library business, book club, concerts in the park. But the real reason was something else. An underlying fear of traveling alone, with no family, no commitments to anyone, the fear that I didn't deserve such joy. Today, after Percy's call, something clicked inside. In a decisive move, I chose my dates, entered my credit card information, and confirmed the reservation. It's done. In 3 weeks, I would be going on an Alaskan cruise. 10 days of absolute freedom. New experiences, stunning scenery. After booking, I pulled a new leather-bound notebook out of my desk drawer, a birthday present from Lionel. On the first page, I wrote, places I want to visit, and started making a list. Alaska, cruise the Inside Passage, whale watching, Denali National Park. New York, Metropolitan Museum of Art, Broadway Central Park. Italy, Venice, Florence, Rome, Japan, cherry blossoms, Kyoto temples, Tokyo gardens. The list was long. All my life I had put off traveling, first because of small children, then because of lack of money, then because of family obligations. Now nothing was stopping me from seeing the world. I turned the page and continued writing. Next to the notebook was a picture of Humphrey, not a wedding picture, as I'd seen before, but taken during our last vacation together in the mountains. He was smiling at the camera, his eyes shining with happiness. That's how I wanted to remember him. Happy, full of life. I wish you could see it, I said aloud, looking at the picture. But now I live for both of us. I continued writing in my notebook, plotting my Alaska travel itinerary. Genoa, Skagway, Hubbard Glacier, Denali National Park. In my mind, I was already there, among majestic mountains and boundless forests, in places where nature had preserved its pristine beauty. Outside the window, the ocean rumbled, eternal, unchanging, free. I closed my notebook, walked to the balcony and opened the doors, letting in the fresh sea breeze. Tomorrow would be a new day, another day of a life that finally belonged only to me.